Psychology of Millennials. Millennials are often misunderstood, labelled as lazy, entitled, overly sensitive, obsessed with phones and validation. But psychology tells a very different story. Millennials didn't become the way they are by accident. They were shaped, slowly, quietly, by the environment they grew up in. To understand millennials, you don't start with their behaviour. You start with the world that raised them. Millennials grew up during rapid change. Technology exploded. Information became constant. Comparison became unavoidable. They were the first generation to be online before their identity was fully formed. Psychology shows that identity develops through feedback, and millennials received more feedback than any generation before them. Likes, comments, views, rankings, metrics. This trained the brain to associate worth with visibility. That doesn't mean millennials crave attention. It means their nervous systems learned early that being seen equals being valued. Another defining psychological trait is delayed stability. Millennials were raised with a promise: study hard, do the right things, and life will be secure. Then reality broke that promise. Economic instability, rising costs, unstable job markets, shifting career paths. Psychology shows that when effort doesn't lead to predictable reward, motivation changes shape. Millennials didn't lose ambition. They became cautious. They value flexibility over loyalty, meaning over titles, safety over prestige. Not because they don't care, but because certainty was taken away early. This is why millennials often appear indecisive. Psychologically, indecision isn't weakness, it's risk awareness. Their brains learn that long-term commitments can collapse unexpectedly, so they keep options open. Another misunderstood trait is emotional sensitivity. Millennials are more open about mental health, stress, anxiety, and burnout. Older generations often see this as fragility. Psychology shows it's actually emotional literacy. Millennials grew up in an era where emotional expression was finally named. Therapy language entered culture. Feelings were given words. When emotions are named, they're felt more clearly. That doesn't make them heavier, it makes them visible. Millennials don't feel more pain than others, they just don't hide it as much. And that visibility is often mistaken for weakness. Another key trait is value-based living. Millennials don't separate work from identity as cleanly. They ask questions previous generations didn't. Does this matter? Does this align with who I am? Is this worth the cost to my mental health? Psychology shows that when survival is uncertain, people search for meaning. Millennials watched institutions fail. They watched authority figures fall. They watched systems promise stability and deliver pressure. So they stopped trusting systems blindly and started trusting values instead. This is why millennials change jobs more often. It's not lack of loyalty, it's refusal to stay where there is no alignment. Another major psychological factor is comparison fatigue. Millennials live inside constant comparison. Not occasional, constant. Social media doesn't just show success, it shows curated success. Psychology shows that the brain doesn't register comparison as inspiration. It registers it as threat. Threat to status. Threat to belonging. Threat to self-worth. Over time, this creates quiet exhaustion. This is why many millennials feel tired even when they aren't physically overworked. Their energy is spent managing self-perception. Another trait is delayed milestones. Marriage, home ownership, career certainty. Millennials reach these later, or not at all. Psychology shows that when traditional timelines break, people internalize the delay as failure, even when it isn't. So many millennials carry silent guilt, feeling behind, feeling late, feeling like they missed something. Not because they did, but because the measuring system never updated. Millennials also value authenticity more than appearance. They grew up watching polished images collapse, scandals, false narratives, manufactured perfection. Psychology shows that repeated exposure to false ideals creates distrust in surface-level success. This is why millennials respond to honesty, messy truth, imperfection. They don't want heroes, they want humans. Another defining factor is burnout's normalization. Millennials entered adulthood during hustle culture. Productivity became identity. Rest became guilt. Psychology shows that when self-worth is tied to output, burnout isn't an accident. It's inevitable. This is why millennials talk about burnout openly. They aren't complaining. They're reporting system failure. They're naming what previous generations endured silently. One more key psychological trait is adaptive resilience. Despite pressure, millennials adapt. They learn new skills quickly. They pivot. They reinvent. They survive instability with creativity. Psychology shows that adaptability is a survival response. Millennials didn't grow up with certainty, so they developed flexibility. That flexibility looks like inconsistency to some, but it's actually intelligence under pressure. At their core, millennials are not weak, they are overloaded. Not entitled, but disillusioned. Not lazy, but cautious. They want connection, but fear exploitation. They want success, but refuse to sacrifice their mental health for it. Psychology makes one thing clear. Millennials are not broken. They are responding accurately to a world that changed faster than the rules. And once you understand that, their behavior stops looking confusing. It starts looking human.